How you guys doing? This is Jonathan from Ethos Decorum. We are on an incredible episode of Sessions with Paula Mans. This is an artist that I follow for the past few years. Incredible artist, so I can't wait for this episode. I'm excited. Paula, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Where do we start? Paula, where do we start? I saw your work. I don't remember where I saw your work at all, right? But I saw it either online, and then I remember the first show. And first of all, what really stood out to me was red, black, white, and like these characters, these people that they really stood out. So I got to start with, you use a lot of red, you use some grain, but it's red. Like, where did you start with that idea of like, this is how my work looks? Because it's very distinctive, at least to me. Yeah.
I think initially when I first started making, my color palette was really monochromatic. So I was thinking mainly like dark colors like grays and blacks or whites. And I think initially I was thinking about the presence of the figure within the piece and the hypervisibility or invisibility of the figure, because I was thinking about the experience of gentrification and those who are left in neighborhoods that are now gentrified. When I moved back to DC, my own neighborhood was completely radically transformed by gentrification. So, and being one of the few remaining black families on the block, it really brought to mind my own visibility as a person. How am I being perceived? And that experience of sticking out a lot whilst other black bodies are being erased, if that makes sense.
Now, you said when I moved back to DC, where did you move from?
Brazil. So I was, after college, I moved to Brazil for 10 years and then returned back to my childhood home in Tacoma.
So we go DC, Brazil for 10 years, which is a long time, and then back to DC. Travel. How did Brazil shape you as an artist?
Oh, I think it transformed me in every way. I came into womanhood in Brazil. I was 21 when I moved there. Had never lived there on my own, never lived on my own, never been super far from my family. And all of a sudden I was transported into this place where I didn't speak the language and I didn't know a single person at 21. I became a mother in Brazil. I became an artist in Brazil. So I think Brazil is really the center of my adult identity and who I am now. I think spiritually it radicalized me in a way. My family's not very religious at all, but going to Brazil and seeing all of these spiritual entities and religious practices that revere blackness and black bodies kind of really opened up doors in my mind in terms of how I view my relationship to spiritual practices. I think that comes out in colors a lot that I use. Red is a super spiritually charged color, not just in Afro-Brazilian religious practices, but also African-American religious practices, which is I'm learning more now in my current work, learning about hoodoo and other Southern-based spiritual practices. So thinking about color red is kind of like the crossroad color between the human realm and the spiritual realm. So thinking about it as really transmuting power as a messenger color, also thinking about it as life force, both the blood that is spilled from childbirth and the blood that is spilled by death. So thinking about really how color can also transport and communicate messages and stories too.
So you started to be an artist in Brazil.
Which is a crazy story.
Go ahead, let us know the story. Yeah.
So I loved to paint, to draw, to sing when I was in high school, but I was kind of discouraged from making after high school because my classes were very rigid, and it was kind of like if you are not a great proficient drawer, you cannot be a good artist. And drawing has always been a sore spot for me as an artist, especially growing up. So I kind of shied away from it completely until I had my daughter. And then I was a stay-at-home mom for the first 3 years of her life. And I really used art to teach her. So I put butcher paper all over our apartment walls so she could draw all over the apartment walls. We did sculpting, we did printmaking, and it kind of opened up a door within me that I had closed for a long time. So I started drawing on my own, painting on my own, and then eventually collage. So I don't think, I think tapping into that play aspect of it reinvigorated myself as an artist. And I don't think I would be an artist at all if it weren't for my daughter. So from there, it kind of took on a life of its own.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I've seen you where you posted online, like she'll be in the studio with you and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
So I think that's dope that you have a young daughter, you're painting, and then you also have these powerful figures, you're telling these powerful stories. When I first saw the work, I was like, the style just stuck out to me. I'll be honest with you, right? It was like this black, gray photographer, but photography kind of, but you knew it was collage work, and they had that red, and I was just like, I remember I was like, this is different. You know what I'm saying? And then I'm like, who are these people? You know what I'm saying? And the reason I say who are these people is when you look at art sometimes you just like it, right? You just like, oh, that speaks to me. But for me, I always love the aha moment because that's when people really connect with an artist. You know what I'm saying? To where that's not just art, that's fashion, that's design. You know, you may see a chair and you're like, oh, I love this chair. And they were like, you know, oh, this chair is the pelican. And you're like, the pelican? Because it does like the pelican. And you're like, oh, now that meaning becomes totally different. So I was like, who are these people? So who are these people?
It's okay. I think people often tend to simplify portraiture. I think they think often that because it's representational, it's the human body, it's more simplistic, or the narratives are more simple. But I think I gravitate towards collage to construct these figures, and I really view it as like Dr. Frankenstein, like reanimating something that's still. So I will print out found images of anywhere between 5 to 6 different people, put them out on my studio floor, and engage in a puzzle making kind of process where I create one figure out of many. And so when I look at the figure, it's not just one figure, it's representative of multiplicity. And I think that that speaks to not only the layered nature of human identity, but specifically talking about diasporic identity, right? So I think of it as really emblematic of identity formation for the African diaspora, thinking about all of the Africans that were enslaved and put through this transatlantic crossing, forced into the bellies of ships, and oftentimes they were put intentionally with people from different ethnic groups and linguistic groups to prevent mutiny, right?
So they were kind of like, I don't know you.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
So they would, thinking about them taking these fragments of their identity, linguistic practices, culinary expressions, spiritual practices, and putting them together to create what we know as African American identity, not just African American in terms of the United States, but across the Americas. And I think that's really a powerful experience that we don't talk about often. We talk about blackness as a technology created by Europe and the West to subjugate. But we don't talk about blackness as a technology of survival enough, I think. Blackness as a technology to overcome and to create a creative force. So I think collage for me really helps me express that. And personally, I lived in Brazil, but I lived in several places in Africa as a kid too, always moving abroad and coming back to Tacoma. So there's always like
where in Africa?
Tanzania, Mozambique, and Eswatini.
Got you. So you're, once again, it feels like your practice and the idea of travel you've seen the world and you've seen how black people live in the world, all over the world in a way that you're like, okay, this is, you know, my experience in America versus Africa versus South America. All of these things now inform this idea of, okay, this is how black people act over here in the continent, outside of the continent, all around the world. That collage work, like, how do you, when you're starting on a piece, are you like, I'm starting on the collage work and I'm telling the story, or like, what's your process with that? And how are you, and also, how are you getting your inspiration as well?
I read a lot. I think I read a lot of academic texts sometimes to structure, especially with this new series that I'm working on, but fiction really ignites something in me that helps me think about the visual poetry that I'm trying to create or the emotion that I'm trying to convey. But when it comes to actual physical making, I always start with the eyes. And I think that's why they're super prominent in the work that I make. I always gravitate towards really strong gazes.
They are always looking at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My kid couldn't be in my studio before. She was like, "Mommy, there's too many eyes watching me." When they were a kid, because it's intense.
That makes sense. You always start with the eyes.
I always start with the eyes. Yeah.
That totally makes sense because, like I said, the shows that I've seen you do, as soon as you walk in, even online, you know, you're like, and it's not like an intense stare, but it's almost like there is something there. You know what I'm saying? So
this is really the first piece that I have obscured the figure. And I've been reading a lot about conjure women and healing women on plantations, and they were like a huge form, not just for physical healing, but spiritual healing, and also passing along generational knowledge about the earth and the body. So I was really thinking about learning about how enslaved women ingested cotton roots to be able to abort pregnancies and control menstrual systems, but also thinking about what happens when they ingest this plant. And the woman becomes part plant, part human herself, and thinking about not just the ways that slavery devastated people's humanity and reduced their humanity, but also thinking about the ways that slavery destroyed nature, mass deforestation, introducing foreign plants into local soil, and how that devastated nature as well. So thinking about the abuse of the enslaved woman's body and the abuse of nature, and how could these two become allies? And this metamorphosis happens where not only are they allies in spirit and in presence, but also physically. So the woman and the plant become one. So this is kind of like,
I love this.
It's coming out of her body.
I'm gonna get to this one, but this is actually one of my favorites.
Really?
Yes, and I just feel like sometimes you follow an artist, and there's always this moment where you see something, and you're like, this right here. Like when I saw it, I was like, I don't know who she is, but the look was just. Maybe because I got daughters, right?
Maybe
because I got daughters. But it was just, I mean, you do a lot of different ladies, but I don't know. I just got to let you know, that right there was just like, oh my goodness, this is crazy.
And that's the first one I created for the series in 2022. I made it. And I didn't think that I would make a body of work out of that one piece, because I wasn't thinking about bodies of work. I was just thinking about one and done pieces. And then 3 years later, I came back to it. So that's a cool
I love that. I got
Thank
that toe
you.
too. Remember?
Yeah.
I remember that. I saw
I remember.
you did a post. You was like, I got totes, and I was like, totes. I gotta get. So I have one. It's red. And you did I think it's a green one. Yeah. What about this one? Now, the reason I'm asking is, a lot of your work is kind of like one figure. What made you decide we're gonna step this thing up and just
Well, I want, ideally, so this is kind of, I want to do 3 figures that scale. That is my dream, to do a wall-sized piece with multiple figures interacting with each other.
Well, it's not your dream.
It's
You're
my
doing
plan.
it. You're doing exactly. You're doing it already.
But I want to go bigger, and I want to really tell a story, kind of like the way that story quilts tell a story. I want to go in that direction with that. So having these 3 pieces made me really think about enslaved women as they're bleeding into the ground. You know, a lot of times women sync up like Bluetooth during menstrual cycles. So what would that mean that multiple women are bleeding at the same time? And this natural phenomenon is happening to several women at the same time. So that's why the cotton buds are emerging from the central figure, and the 2 women are offering the cotton root to her. So it's kind of thinking about not just one isolated incident, but kind of like a chain reaction.
Got you. This one is different.
Yeah.
No red.
No red.
No red.
That was from my solo at home. Oh. Yeah. That's when I was thinking very like black, white, gray.
Got you. I love this.
Thank you.
Tell us about this one. I see you did the sketch.
Yeah.
So that means it came from over there?
Yeah.
And then it hit over here. Mm-hmm. Tell us about this. Power, 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 power. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there is this quote by this historian from Burkina Faso. His name is Joseph Kizerbo, and he says, like, the diaspora is like the story of Osiris, whose body was cut into pieces and thrown around the globe. And he says, like, it's kind of like a call to action, a mission statement, that it's our responsibility to put the diaspora back together again. So that really deeply impacts my making and use of collage. So when I see this, it's a deconstructed Pan-African flag. So the background is pieces from that same flag that I adhere to the surface and then paint over. And I'm thinking about these figures not really have, you don't know where one begins, one ends. They kind of, that center arm, they kind of blend together. So thinking about Black unity, thinking about Black power, thinking about the ways in which Black bodies can be bridges to each other. So thinking about, you know, now we're living in a very unique moment where there's a lot of nativism, a lot of closing of borders, a lot of identifying who belongs and who doesn't. But what does that mean to a diasporic body that is essentially borderless, be it through culture, through historical formations, be it through actual physical bodies? So thinking about how can our togetherness increase our power as a people. So that's what this Black Star series is about.
I love this.
Thank you.
Like, this is, I love this.
Thank
like,
you.
Yeah, that, like, yeah. You talked about going to the plantation.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even do that in the interview.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even do that in the sit-down interview.
Mm-hmm.
What was your experience like going to a plantation?
Mm-hmm.
That's heavy.
Yeah. I had never been to a plantation before. I went to 2, and we spent 4 hours at each.
The same day?
Mm-hmm. In rural Louisiana.
Yeesh, that's
yeah.
heavy.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because the first plantation we went to was like clearly historical preservation of the slave owner's house.
Mm-hmm.
And the cabins were falling apart. The home was climate controlled. There are images of the family across generations. And there were 400 enslaved people at its height. And it was the size of Manhattan at its height. So it was one of the biggest plantations along the Mississippi River. But given that there were like 400 at the height, there was no graveyard, no plaque marking their existence, no images of them, except there was one picture in the background of the enslaver's family of a girl. You couldn't really see her features because of the quality of the photography at the time. But talking about signs, so I got home from the long day at the 2 plantations. It was hot. We were walking around everywhere, and it was heavy. The energy was heavy. I went to sleep in my hotel room, and then something fell in the kitchen. And immediately in my mind, her face popped up. So I was like, I have to create faces that are visible because her face wasn't seen. Even though there's photographic evidence of her, I have to make her eyes visible and her presence visible. And not just her, but all of these women that had this experience. So that was another push for me to make this work. But the plantations were important because I can't make this work and not experience it physically on some level. This is heavy work, heavy subject matter, emotionally heavy, and it's my ancestors' work. So it's like it's important for me to do justice to that work by having these experiences because my temporary discomfort is nothing compared to what their experience was and their power was. And I think telling these stories through the lens of power is really important.
Yeah, that's true. That's deep. Yeah. So you took the you took the soil from the plantation?
The soil, the branches, and the raw cotton.
The raw cotton.
Mm-hmm.
That's heavy, Paula. I mean, that's a lot to process
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's, I mean, you know, you're on the scene of something that's so powerful that affects us all. Mm-hmm. And for the rest of history, it's going to affect us all, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And it's always a reminder, like, you know, was it your plan to, did you take it at the moment? Or were you like, if I go there, I'm going to take it because I would? It was just like in the moment, right?
Because the plantation that I went to, the first one, they didn't have a graveyard, and the fields are still being farmed. and they were buried in the fields, the enslaved people. So when I heard that, all I had was a yogurt cup
That's
and
what I
my
was
tote
gonna ask
bag.
you. Yeah, I was going to ask you,
Because I had
like,
breakfast on the bus, and I just shoveled as much as I could into my bag, because there's no way that we can't. How are we not honoring the land that these people are resting in, that they worked for generations, for centuries? So I think adding these natural materials that are like site specific is really adds to the spiritual charge of the work and the energy of the work. There's like a smell to the work that reminds me of the place because of the soil, because of the branches, and it just makes it more powerful to me in my head.
Before the interview, you said I get in my head a lot. How do you know that you get in your head a lot? How do you kind of combat that to be like, let's not overthink this. Let's just let the work flow.
I think so. I visited Plantations as a part of this series that I'm working on in October, and I had been in my windowless studio for months trying to create, but hitting a wall because I was overthinking, leaning too heavily into books and into reading, and not existing within my body enough. So when I went to the Plantations, that's when the work opened in a new way. It forced me to experience this information in like a tactile, physical way. So just feeling the earth, which led me to collect soil from the plantations, touching the raw cotton, which led me to incorporate raw cotton in the series, and really think not just so human-centered within the work, but also forcing me to view nature as equally as protagonistic within the work. And then that pushed me to kind of start thinking about African-American folk tales and surrealism, and how can I talk about not only the human side of this story, but also the ways in which nature was also impacted, and how we can create a bridge between these two narratives. So it made me realize two things: that I was reproducing like a Western way of communicating and acquiring knowledge by focusing so much on reading. But then there is a deeply physical and a more indigenous way of learning, which is more in line with the work that I'm trying to make. Knowledge that comes from your body, from your intuition, knowledge that comes from the ways that you communicate and relate to the earth. And that kind of just exploded everything in terms of my own process and just the way that I view my artist mind, I guess. So I really now understand that being in the studio is great, but you got to get out and you got to live and you have to experience to be able to create powerful or meaningful work.
Yeah. That like the idea of getting out. I was going to go say, hey, what inspires you outside of the work? But before I ask you that, how do you know when you got a piece for real? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of trial and error. You're like, this ain't working, this ain't working. How do you know, like this right here? How do you know when you're just like, okay, we on to something right? I'm cooking right now. How do you know when you're cooking? How do you know when you're like, listen, Paula's cooking right now. You're in the studio by yourself, and you had that moment, because every creative has that moment to where they're like, oh, I'm doing something good. How do you know that you have that moment? What's that feeling that you're like, okay, we're good?
I think the figure speaks to me. I think it might sound really woo-woo, but they really do communicate.
Because I gotta cut you off. The last interview we did, somebody said the same thing. So what they saying to you? What did they say to you, Paula?
Sometimes I'll have like a really emotional response to them, which is strange because I'm actively in the process of creating, but there's something that happens where even though it's my hand making, they kind of form themselves and they communicate something to me. So when I have some kind of emotional feedback to what I create, that's when I know that I'm on the right path. I'll often start by creating the figures first and off of the surface, and then it's always that moment when I apply to the surface, something goes wrong. There's bubble in the paper or something tears, and then I have to recreate again. But it's in that moment that the work kind of makes itself. But I think that I read a quote recently that said, "You're making the work, but the work is also making you." And I think
that's a bar. That's a bar right
really
there.
True.
That's crazy right
true.
there.
There's so much you learn about yourself emotionally, intellectually by making, that I've never had an experience quite like it in any other way. I used to think I wanted to be a researcher or a writer, but I think that this form of visual storytelling is so much more immediate. so much more democratic and so much more impactful, I think. So I think there's always a moment when they take over.
So you answered my next question. I was about to say to you, how do you know when you're done? But you just know when you're done. You just like, listen, we're done. Now, working in the studio, you're doing a lot of research, you're doing a lot of reading. You also realize that you got to get out there for it to speed up the process so you're not in your head.
Yeah.
What are you doing to just disengage from the work to be like, okay, what inspires you outside of the work? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I take a lot of walks, which is really cool being in this studio because I'm right by Rock Creek Trail, so I'll just leave the studio. Sometimes I'll just sit out in nature for a little bit, and I think it's important for overthinkers to get out of your head and get into your body, but being in nature particularly, it's like, what you got going on is so small, and the world is so big that perspective really helps realign me or refocus my brain.
So, speaking of overthinkers, you don't have to be an artist. You could be a fashion designer, do music, anybody who's in a creative space. I think most people are overthinkers. What are your tips to combat overthinking? Because you're aware of it. A lot of us are not aware that we're overthinking. You know what I'm saying? But we are.
Yeah.
Is it some form of procrastination? Is this some form of how is the work gonna where is it gonna end up? Is it like, where do you think that overthinking stems from? Is it, if I make the work like this, how are they gonna perceive it? Or you just wanna cover enough bases? And the reason I ask that question is this. When I see the artwork, I love it, but I don't necessarily know the background story. I have to have that aha moment as the audience, right? But you as the artist, you're like, this is why I'm making this is why this dirt is from the plantation, this is a story there. But I may not get that story initially. I may not even get that story. Some people just don't get that story. They love the art until they go deeper in there. So as an overthinker, what are your ways of combating that? Because the audience themselves, you don't have any control over them.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you just don't. So how are you now saying, I'm aware that I'm an overthinker. These are the things that I'm going to do to just let that go?
I used to think that sketching would help focus me, but I think that's also just my other way of overthinking.
Gotcha.
So you see that wall is full of sketches, and I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. But I think that also traps me and prevents me from progressing. So I just have to make stuff and not think about it. Just do it.
How much of that sketching wall goes here? Like,
maybe like 50%, 40%.
Okay.
Yeah, 40%. But I think it helps me visually craft a sequence for the narrative, if that makes, or narrows down the narrative. Because when I met you at Shaw, it was like this huge idea that I had, and I didn't know how to narrow it.
Gotcha.
But now I'm understanding that if I'm going to create like a visual folktale, there has to be a sequence, because narrative has sequence.
Gotcha.
And sketching helps me develop sequence, because I really want to get into more narrative-driven work rather than just creating a portrait or an image. I want it to have layered meaning and storytelling, and that requires sequencing and thinking. But at the same time, I don't want to use it as a crutch.
I got you.
If that makes sense.
I got you. What are some things you learn about doing an art show? Exhibitions. The do and don'ts that you learn from your exhibitions you've done that I know can help a lot of people. What are some of the do and don'ts the way you're like, I wouldn't do this again. I would definitely do this.
I think from my last solo at Hillier, I had a wide range of dimension scale work, and I think that is something that I'll do in the future. I really want to go bigger, which is why that piece is so big. But it's important, I think, if you are interested in selling your work, which all artists are, that you have a variety of choice in terms of scale, because not everyone has space in their house for a huge piece. But if you have a 9x9 and you have a 20x20 and then you keep going bigger, it allows collectors from all different walks of life to be able to access your work.
I think that's important you said that, because sometimes people may see you, first of all, they may not be able to afford it,
exactly.
but they really want to support and they love the work. And I also feel like people who buy the smaller pieces almost grow with the artist, because now they're like, okay, I'll get the 10x10 And then they're almost like, man, I can't wait for that next show to where now I'll get, the 14 by 14 because I really love his work or I really love her work. So I feel like artists, and not every artist does that, but I think it's very good when you see different dimensions to where people like, I'll get this. And then it makes the collectors ambitious too, because now they're like, well, I love it, but I want something bigger because, like when I'm drinking my coffee, that's what I'm looking at. I want to see something bigger. It's so funny you said that about dimensions. I've seen 2 shows. I forgot the name of the artist, but it was in DC, one of those retrospective shows. And I went to Florida a few years ago, and I went to the Dali Museum. And it's funny you said that about bigger, because I really like ambitious artists. You can also see artists who are growing. So when you go to the Dali Museum, I thought I was gonna walk in there and just see these crazy, weird Dali paintings just all over They were like small in the beginning. They were like paintings, they were small, and as you move through the room, they got bigger. And I was like, oh, that's an artist's ambition. It's almost like, I'll paint this, I'll paint that. Now we're gonna go bigger, we're gonna go bigger. And by the time we was at the show, at the end of it, is when, the Dali we know now is when you're like, okay, this dude is just,
On another level.
he's out there. I don't know what he's doing. This is crazy, but it was so small. So when I came in the studio just now, that's the first thing I noticed. Seeing your first and your second show, that's the first thing I noticed, the scales, and I was like, okay, she's like what, like really, like just taking it to the next level, I shouldn't ask this, but I will ask this: where you see yourself in 10 years?
No,
not where you see yourself in 10 years. Where you want to be in 10 years? Where you see yourself in 10 years, just feel like, where do you want to be in 10 years? Let's manifest it.
Okay. Bucket list, I would love to have a museum show. I would love to show in Salvador, Brazil. There's an amazing Afro-Brazilian museum in Salvador that it has incredible exhibitions. I would love to participate in a group show with artists from there because it's such an important part of my own story as an artist. I'd love to do a residency on the continent. To go back to the continent as an adult, I think would be transformational too, and important for my own personal development, but also artistic development. I think those are my big bucket list.
What's the best part of being an artist?
I think it's like you're on another, this sounds really, on another plane of existence, I think. I think that there's a lot of solitude involved in being an artist, which is something that I don't think is talked about enough. But I think as overwhelming as that solitude can be sometimes, there's like a quiet that allows you to tap into your spirit in a much deeper way than I've ever experienced before, which can be unsettling sometimes because it's a lot of silence, a lot of solitude, but it's also opens up so much doors within your being to be able to understand your spirit, your mind, the way that you think in a way that I've never experienced before. I think that being an artist is a tremendous responsibility. I think particularly in these times we're living in, we are an archive of the moment. I mean, we will be creating artifacts that will be examined for generations to come. I think that art is really like the birthplace of democracy. It's everyone using their voices, their worldview, their perspective to create objects, to create images that are reflective of all of that. And I think that, I don't think that there's any more honorable thing to do than to be an artist.
Now that's all good, Paula. What's the worst part about being an artist?
The same thing, the solitude. I mean, no one in my family has ever been an artist. There are very few entrepreneurs, and this is entrepreneurship, creative entrepreneurship, but it's very non-conventional.
Do you feel like you have to navigate spaces telling people you're an artist? When I say navigate spaces, like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Well,
to be like, hey, it's Monday, and I'm going to be in the studio painting. Like,
Yeah, and I think people don't understand that either, which is where the loneliness piece comes from. I mean, we live in DC. The first question is, what do you do? Where do you work? And then when you say, I'm an artist, people either are confused or they lose interest, if that makes sense. Because it's so, again, entrepreneurship is already an unconventional path. Being an artist entrepreneur is like even more of a detour off of the path. So I think you kind of have to be delusional to do this work. You have to really believe in yourself and what you're making, even when that's really hard to do, even when you don't have a show or you don't get the grant or you don't get the fellowship. You have to have this such strong self-belief to the point of delusion to be able to make this work.
To that point of delusion, anybody who pursuing anything, there is a level of delusion until you prove them wrong or you prove the world or the universe comes through for you. But in those periods of delusion, there's always those moments, there's always a few moments that the universe, God will guide you in almost the way you're like, I know I'm on the right path, even though everybody else think I'm crazy, even though they don't think you're crazy, but you know what I mean. I know I'm on the right path. What are some of those moments you've had? I'm gonna ask, Paula.
No, it's true.
For real.
So, you know the collection of folk tales is called The People Could Fly? Have you ever read it?
I gotta look it up.
I have it here.
Okay.
So I would say only about 2 months ago did I realize, like you should write a this should be a visual folk tale. And I had a studio visit and I was sharing my books with the person visiting. And I opened up my copy of People Who Could Fly that I was given as a child. I was given on my 3rd birthday by my uncle. And I hadn't opened the book in years. I opened it, and then on the title page was a note from him that said, one day you'll write your own folk tales. And that was given to me when I was 3 years old. So that's
wild.
Yeah, and that was around the same time that I'd gotten like 5 no's in 1 week for funding and fellowships, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this work.
Jeez.
So you have to open yourself to these signs, if that makes sense, because there are signs in the universe that are going to affirm you and tell you you're on the right path. And these no's that you're getting are temporary, they're in this moment. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't invest and continue to make despite all of that, because this is what you're supposed to, I feel this is what I'm supposed to do. So little signs like that mean everything. They're transformational because they're such a strong affirmation that when I was 3 years old, this is what I was supposed to be doing since I was 3, and it's taken me almost 37 years to get on that path, so I really believe in those things.
I think that's it, Paula. That's crazy. Like
I
can't even go there.
I have to show you.
So thank you, Paula, for having us. We
you.
appreciate it. This is Jonathan from Ethos Decorum. This is Sessions. Paula Mans. Check out her work. Incredible work. Thank you, Paula. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.